That is what I expect, but we shall see. We shall see. I have babbled long enough. The introduction is made. We shall begin with the Fir-Tree. Far out in the forest grew a pretty little fir-tree. It had a favorable place. The sun shined brightly on it, and there was plenty of fresh air, while many taller comrades, both pines and firs, were thriving around it. The little fir tree longingly desired to grow taller. It was indifferent to the warm sun and the fresh air. It took no notice of the peasant children who ran about and chattered when they had come out to gather strawberries and raspberries. Often they came with a basket full and had shredded strawberries on a straw like beads. Then they used to sit down near the little fir tree and say, "What a pretty little tree this one is." But this the tree did not like to hear at all. In the following year it grew taller by a considerable shoot, and all the year after by another one, for by the number of shoots which fir trees have, we may discover how many years they have grown. "Oh, that I were as tall a tree as the others," sighed the little tree. "Then I might spread out my branches far around and look with my crown out into the wide world. The birds would build their nests in my boughs, and when the wind blew I could proudly nod, just like the others yonder." It took no delight in the sunshine, in the birds, nor in the red clouds which in the morning and evening passed over it. When the winter had come and the snow was lying white and sparkling on the ground, often a hare came running and jumped right over the little tree. Oh, that annoyed it so much! But 2 winters passed, and in the third the little tree was already so high that the hare had to run around it. To grow, to become tall and old, this is the most desirable thing in the world," thought the tree. Nice rhyme, by the way. Every year in autumn woodcutters came and felled several of the biggest trees. The young tree, now well grown, shuddered, for the tall magnificent trees fell to the ground with a crash, and when their branches were hewn off wait, yeah, when their branches were hewn off, the trees looked so naked, long, and slender. They were hardly to be recognized. Then they were placed upon carts, and horses drew them out of the wood. Whither were they going? What was to become of them? In spring, when the shallows and storks returned, the tree asked them, "Can you not tell me whither they have taken them? Have you not met them?" The swallows knew nothing about them, but the stork looked pensive, nodded his head, and said, "Yes, I think I know. When I left Egypt..." Hold on. Oops. There we go. "When I left Egypt, I passed by many new ships, and on the ships were splendid masts. I suppose these were the trees, for they smelled like fir trees, and they looked very stately indeed. I wish I were tall enough to go over the sea. I would like to know what the sea is. What does it look like?" "To explain that," replied the stork, "would take me too long." And thus, and thus saying, he flew away. "Enjoy thy youth," said the sunbeams. "Take pleasure in thy vigorous growth, in the fresh life that is within thee." The wind kissed the tree, and the dew shed tears over it, but the fir tree did not understand them. About Christmas time, people cut down many trees which were quite young and smaller than the fir tree, which had no rest and always wished to be off. These young trees, the very best that could be found, kept all their branches. They were placed upon carts and drawn out of the wood by horses. "What are they doing with them?" asked the fir tree. "They are not taller than I am. Nay, there was one much smaller. Why did they retain all their branches? Where are they conveying them to? We can tell you, we know, chirped the sparrows. Down below in the town, we have looked through the windows. We know where they are taken to. They come to the greatest splendor you can imagine. We have looked in the windows and have seen them standing in the middle of a warm room covered with the most beautiful things: gilded apples, gingerbread toys, and many, many wax candles. And then asked the and then asked the fir tree, trembling all over, what happens after that? Why, that is all we have seen, but that was very beautiful. I wonder whether I am destined to receive such great splendor, exclaimed the fir tree merrily. That is far better than crossing the sea. Oh, how much I am longing for the time. I wish Christmas had arrived. Now I am tall, and I have grown to a good length like the others which they took away last year. I wish I were already placed on the cart or in the warm room adorned with all the bright and beautiful things. And then there is something much better and bright and wait. And then there is something much better and brighter to come. Oh, why would they decorate the tree so beautifully? Yes, indeed, there is something much splendid and grand to follow. But what can it be? Oh, how I suffer with longing! I hardly know how I feel. Enjoy your presence, said the air and the sunshine, the light in thy young life here in the forest. Okay, by this time the story is pretty obvious what it's trying to get at. But the tree did not enjoy anything. But the tree did not enjoy anything. Get it? It grew and grew. Get it? Winter and summer it was green, and people who saw it said that it was a beautiful tree. Let's move on to the next page. Placing it here, and let's continue. Beautiful. Christmas came at last, and the tree was the first to be cut down. The axe entered deeply into its stem. The tree fell groaning to the ground. A pain and a faintness overcome it. It was unable to think of the happiness to come. It was sad that it had to leave its home, the spot where it had grown up. It knew well enough that it would never see again the dear old comrades, the little bushes and the flowers, and perhaps not even the birds. Parting was not at all pleasant. The tree did not recover until it was taken from the cart in a courtyard with other trees, and heard a man say, "This one is very fine. We only want this one." Two servants in livery soon came and carried the tree into a large, beautiful room. The walls were all covered with pictures, and by the side of the tile stove stood big Chinese vases with lions on the lids. There were rocking chairs, couches covered with silk. On a large table were displayed picture books and toys of very great value. At least, so the children said. The fir tree was put into a large vessel filled with sand, but nobody could see that it was a vessel, for it was covered all over with green cloth and placed on a handsome carpet of many colors. How the fir tree trembled! What was to happen now? The young ladies of the house, aided by the servants, adorned the tree. They hung on its branches little nets cut out of colored paper and filled with sweets. Gilded apples and walnuts were fastened to the tree as if they grew on it, and more than 100 small candles, red, blue, and white, were fixed to the branches. Dolls looking exactly like human beings, the tree had never seen anything of the like before, were hanging in the green foliage, and on the very top of the tree they fixed a glittering star of tinsel. It was very beautiful. "Tonight," they all said, "tonight it will shine." Oh, that evening had come, thought the tree. I wish the candles were lighted. And what will happen then? I wonder if the trees will come from the wood to look at me, or if the sparrows will look in at the windows. Am I to grow fast here and remain winter and summer adorned as I am now? Oh my gosh, it's terrible. Indeed, that was not a bad guess. Its longing made its bark ache for a tree. is just as bad as a headache for us. At last the candles were lighted. What a blaze of light! What a splendor! The tree trembled so much with joy in all its branches that one of the lights set fire to one of its boughs and scorched it. "Heaven preserve us!" exclaimed the young ladies, and quickly extinguished the flame. Now the tree was no longer allowed to tremble. That was dreadful. It was so afraid lest it might lose some of its ornaments. It was quite dazzled by all the splendor. Then the folding doors were thrown open, and the children rushed into the room as if they wished to upset the tree. The elders followed for a moment. Wait, the elders followed. Oh my gosh, okay, I got it, finally. Got it right. For a moment, the children stood silent with surprise, but only for a moment. Then they shouted for joy till the room rang. They danced joyfully around the tree, and present after present was taken from it. "What are they doing?" thought the tree. "What is it to happen?" The candles burned gradually down to the boughs on which they were fastened and were put out, and then the children were allowed to plunder the tree. Oh, how they rushed at it! All its branches cracked, and had it not been fastened with the glittering star to the ceiling, they would have upset it. The children were dancing about with their beautiful toys. Nobody took any notice of the tree except the old nurse, who came and looked at the branches, but only to see if there was not a fig or an apple left on them. "A story, a story!" cried the children, while they pulled a small stout man towards the tree. He seated himself just underneath the tree, for there we were in its green He seated himself just underneath the tree. "For there we were in its green shade," he said, "and it will be an advantage to the tree to listen. But I shall only tell one story. Would you like to hear Ivede Avede, or Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs but came to honors after all and married a princess?" "Ivede Avede!" cried some. "Humpty Dumpty!" cried others. There was a good deal of crying and shouting, only the fir-tree was quite silent and thought to itself, "Am I not to take part of this?" But it had already done what it was expected to do. And the man told the story of Humpty Dumpty, who fell downstairs, and after all came to honors and married the princess. And the children clapped their hands and cried, "Go on, tell us another!" They wished also to hear the story of Ivede Avede, but he only told that of Humpty Dumpty. The fir-tree was standing quite silent and thoughtful. The birds Where was I? Oh. The birds of the wood had never told such stories. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs and yet married a princess. Thus it happens in the world, thought the fir-tree, and believed that it was all true, because such a nice man had told the story. Yes, indeed. Because such a nice man had told the story. Well, well, who knows? Perhaps I shall also fall downstairs and marry a princess. And it looked forward with joy to being adorned again on the following day with toys, glitter, and fruit. Tomorrow I shall not tremble, it thought. I shall enjoy all my splendor thoroughly. Tomorrow I shall hear the story of Humpty Dumpty again, and perhaps also that of Ivede Avede. All night the tree was standing silent and thoughtful. In the morning the manservants and housemaids entered the room. Now, thought the tree, they will adorn me again. But they dragged it out of the room, upstairs and into the garret, and placed it there in a dark corner where no daylight reached it. What does this mean? Thought the tree. What am I to do here? What? Oops. Oh, wow. I really thought we were near the ending, but we still have a couple of pages left. What am I to hear in such a place? And it leaned against the wall, and thought, and indeed it had time enough to think, for days and nights passed. But nobody came upstairs, and when at last somebody did come, it was only to store away some big chests. Thus the tree was quite hidden. One might have thought that they had entirely forgotten it. Yes, imagine that. Now it is winter, thought the tree. The ground is so hard and covered with snow that people cannot plant me again. Therefore, I think they shelter me here until spring comes. How thoughtful, how kind people are to me. I only wish it was not quite so dark and so dreadfully lonely here. Not even a small hare is to be seen. How nice it was in the wood. Here we go. When the snow covered the ground and the hare was running by, I should not even mind his jumping right over me, although then I could not bear the thought of it. It is awfully lonely here indeed. Squeak, squeak, a little mouse said just then, creeping timidly forward. Another one soon followed. They sniffed at the fir tree and slipped into its branches. Oh, that it were not so bitter cold, said the mice. Then we... I want to do a voice for the mice. Let me go again. Oh, that it were not so bitter cold, said the mice. Then we should feel quite comfortable here. Don't you think so, old Fir-Tree? I am not old at all, replied the Fir-Tree. There are many much older than myself. Where do you come from? Asked the mice. What do you know? For they were very inquisitive. Tell us about the most beautiful place on earth. Have you been there? Have you been in the pantry where cheeses lie on the shelves and hams hang from the ceiling, where one can dance on tallow candles and go in thin and come out fat? I have not been there, said the tree. I have not been there, said the tree, but I know the wood where the sun shines and the birds sing. And then the tree told the mice all about its youth. The little mice, who had never heard anything like it before, listened attentively and exclaimed, You have seen a great deal indeed. How happy you must have felt. Do you think so? Said the tree, and reflected on its own story. After all, those days were not unhappy. Then it told them all about Christmas Eve, when it was so beautifully adorned with cake and lights. You must have been very happy, you old Fir-Tree, replied the mice. I am not old at all, repeated the tree. I only left the wood this winter. I am somewhat forward in my growth. How well you can tell stories, said the little mice. Next night they returned with 4 more little mice, whom they wished to hear what the tree had to relate. The more the tree told them, the more it remembered distinctly all that had happened, and it thought, those days were happy indeed, but they may come again. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs and married a princess after all. Perhaps I may also marry a princess. And then the Fir-Tree thought of a pretty little birch in the wood, which appeared to it a beautiful princess. Who is Dumpty Dumpty? Asked the little mice, and then the tree had to relate the whole tale. It remembered every word of it, and the little mice were so delighted that they nearly jumped to the top of the tree for joy. The next night, many more mice came to listen to the tree, and on Sunday 2 rats came. They, however, said the story was not pretty. The little mice were very sorry, for they began to think less of it. Do you know only that one story? Asked the rats. Only that one, said the tree, and that I heard on the happiest night of my life. But then I did not know how happy I was. That is a very poor tale, said the rats. Do you not know one about bacon and tallow candles, a sort of storeroom story? No, said the tree. We do not care for this one. Thus saying, the rats went off. In the end, also the little mouse stayed away, and the tree sighed and said, How pleasant it was to see all the lively little mice sitting round me when I talked. Now all this is past. I should be very pleased if they came to fetch me away from here. But whenever would that happen? One morning people came to tidy the garret. The chests were put aside, the tree was dragged out of its corner and thrown roughly to the ground. A manservant carried it at once towards the staircase where the sun was shining. Now life is beginning again, thought the tree. It felt the fresh air and the first sunbeams, and soon it was carried into the courtyard. Oh boy, here we go. All happened so quickly that the tree forgot to look at itself. There was so much about it to look at. The courtyard bordered on a garden where all plants were in flower. The roses hung fresh and fragrant over the small fence, the lime trees were blooming, and the swallows flew about, saying, "Tweet, tweet, tweet, my husband has come." But they did not mean the fir tree. "Now I shall live," exclaimed the fir tree, joyfully spreading out its branches. But alas, they were all withered and yellow, and it lay between weeds and nettles. The star of gilt paper was still fixed to its top and glittered in the sunshine. Some of the bright children who had been dancing around the tree so merrily on Christmas Eve were playing in the courtyard. One of the smallest came and tore the gilt star off. All right, final half. Okay. "Look, what is it still sticking to the ugly fir tree?" said the child, treading on the branches which cracked under its boots. And the tree looked at all the fresh and beautiful flowers in the garden. It looked at itself and wished that it had remained in the dark corner of the garret. It remembered its bright youth in the forest, the delightful Christmas Eve, the little mice which had so quietly listened to the story of Humpty Dumpty. "All is over," said the old tree. Oof. Damn. "Oh, that I had enjoyed myself while I could do so. All is passed away." A manservant came and chopped the tree into small pieces until a large bundle was lying on the ground. Then he placed them in the fire under a large copper, where they blazed up brightly. The tree sighed deeply, and each the tree sighed deeply, and each sigh was as loud as a little pistol shot. The children, who were playing near, came and sat down before the fire, and looking into it, cried, "Pop! Pop!" But at each little shot, which was... Wait. Okay, I apologize. The following sentence didn't make sense at first. But at each little shot, which was a deep sigh, the tree thought of a summer day in the wood, or a winter night there when the stars sparkled. It remembered the Christmas Eve and Humpty Dumpty, the only fairy tale which it had heard and knew to tell, and then it was all burned up. The boys played in the garden, and the smallest had fixed the gilt star which had adorned the tree on its happiest night on his breast. Now all had come to an end. The tree came to an end, and also the story. For all stories come to an end.